at UNM, and we are halfway through the semester. And to honor that, we're delighted to have Marygold Walsh-Dilley from Geography and Environmental Studies and Myrriah Gomez from the Honors College to talk to us today about different ways to get your semester back on track or on track if you never quite managed to do it during the first half of the semester. So I appreciate your making the time to join us, and I'm going to turn it over to Marygold and Myrriah now.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're really excited to present some information that we hope will be useful to you. So Marygold, I think you have the slides ready to go, and we're gonna forego like a long description, introduction of ourselves, and just jump into things since we are limited on time and we really want to leave a lot of time to do workshopping. But what we will, oh, I guess maybe I should have run it. Will you run to the next slide, Marygold? Just to give everybody an overview.
Is it not working?
No, just hit present on the top.
Okay. I have like all the things in my.
Yeah, so just to give you an overview of what we're going to be covering today. We're going to talk a little bit about NCFDD, which is part of the reason why we're here today. We're going to discuss semester planning, weekly planning, and daily writing. Oh, what happened?
I don't know. Sorry, I
It's
can't
okay.
do the things that I need to do online. Okay.
Oh, now my computer is giving me trouble. Sorry. I had to get a brand new computer yesterday because mine totally shut down on me. And now it's asking me to give permissions for all kinds of Zoom stuff. Okay, we'll talk about semester planning, weekly planning, and daily writing. We'll also discuss how to identify SMART goals, and then we'll map them onto the remaining weeks in the semester. So this is the workshop part for you all. We'll be creating some goals, turning them into SMART goals, and then actually mapping them onto the weeks. Next slide, please. So the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity is a really great program that's offered to all UNM faculty and graduate students because we have an institutional membership through the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. If you are not already a member, we highly, highly encourage you become a member using our institutional membership, and we'll talk about that more at the end. One of the programs that NCFDD offers is this 12-week faculty success program, also called a boot camp. And one of the weeks, one of the tools, one of the strategies that we learned, Marygold and I both took it different semesters. I just finished it this summer. You took it last fall, I think, Marygold, or the spring before?
Last summer.
Last summer. So we both took the summer editions of it. And one of the things that we learned in this program was strategic semester planning. And so that's what we wanted to focus on today. There are grants available to offset the majority of the costs. Oops, can you go back? To offset the majority of the costs through UNM Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I believe that call is out right now. And then they do offer free alumni support. So you can essentially retake the program without the mentoring, the direct mentoring. And Marygold and I are both still involved in alumni programs. I participate in a writing group with my cohort. And I think you do something similar, Marygold, with yours.
Yeah, they give you, in the 12-week program, you get put into small groups, accountability groups, they call them. And I still meet regularly with my small accountability group.
Mm-hmm. Next slide, please. So essentially, the way that the program operates is the goal is to get all faculty into a daily writing practice. We emphasize research and publication so much, but many of us don't have time, or rather make time to work on our publications. And so with that in mind, one of the bigger goals of the program is to get participants to develop a daily writing practice. And so with that being said, really it's a tiered system. that starts with strategic planning for each semester and moves into executing that through weekly planning meetings, and then the daily writing practice. Next slide. So I'll talk a little bit about semester planning. And then when we discuss weekly planning and daily planning, we're going to ask you all to maybe unmute and jump into some of the conversation. So for semester planning, if you've never created a strategic plan for your semester, essentially what this is a document that helps you identify up to 3 major work-related goals. And then it also asks you or encourages you to create up to 3 major personal goals. It's really important to balance that, professional and personal, not just for like this work-life balance, but really because if you're entirely focused on writing and research, part of what you're doing gets left out or left behind and you burn out too quickly. It also emphasizes, and we also emphasize, that you create SMART goals. Marygold's going to walk us through what SMART goals are in a second. It's actually an acronym. And then your semester plan will essentially have 16 weeks or however many weeks correspond to your semester. I'm not entirely sure if we're all UNM faculty or graduate students or employees, staff maybe here today. But basically you're doing a quarter planning. So if your semester is 18 weeks, you can adapt that however you need to. And then you map your SMART goals onto your semester. Next slide, please. So once you have created SMART goals, you've mapped them onto the 16-week essentially schedule, you execute them in smaller steps. So one of the things that the program and we advocate is weekly planning. So I actually started doing weekly planning a little over a year ago. I joined a writing group that was separate from the NCFDD program. And the reason that I did this was because I was trying to get institutional support to participate in the program last fall, and the support was not available at that time or no longer available. And so I found a writing group that I was able to participate in, and the person who ran the writing group, or still runs it, I guess, was advocating for these weekly planning sessions. So some people call them Sunday planning, some people call them Sunday meetings. I actually don't follow the Sunday plan because it's not conducive to my personal schedule. So I do mine first thing on Monday morning. If I have time on Friday afternoons, sometimes I do it actually on Friday afternoons. So in addition to entering all of my meetings and work obligations for the week, I also have like a little system where I try to look at my weekly planning holistically and kind of compare that against my strategic planning. So the 5 things that I focus on for that are my celebrations. Did I complete a project this week? Did I catch up on my grading this week? Did I do service obligations or extra service obligations for the week? This is also like a good way to look back and fill in your CV. Some people actually, as part of their Sunday planning or part of their Friday afternoon planning, update their CVs, but I am not there yet. I include my carryovers. So Marygold and I in a little while want to talk a little bit about how your all semesters are going. I think a lot of people are just starting to express that they feel really overwhelmed coming back to campus, coming back face-to-face, maybe teaching face-to-face and online classes like I'm doing this semester. So whatever you don't finish in terms of those big projects or big goals, they fall under carryovers. And then what are your primary goals for next week? So I always check my primary goals against my strategic plan. And then who do you have for support? Advance has often been, or recently become, a system of support for me. When I participated, and Marygold and I actually both participated in a writing retreat, I guess, at Advance this summer. That was hugely supportive in getting one of my big primary goals done, which I'll talk about later. And then rewards. This is something that's really difficult for a lot of people. It's difficult for me. How you're rewarding yourself can be anything like something really superficial, buying yourself, a new planner or a new, mine at one point was when I finished my manuscript, I was going to buy a new computer. And then when I hit that point, I said, I don't need a new computer. And then yesterday I was forced into buying a new computer. So that was my reward for the week. The other thing that you should try to implement during your weekly planning is writing down all your obligations in a spreadsheet, or a planner or a calendar. Some people like to use multiple methods for this. I typically only use one in addition to my Outlook calendar. I like paper planners. Some people advise against it because they're not easy to change. It's really difficult to erase on there if things change. That's one of the reasons I like to use it. I've gotten into the habit now because of my weekly planning and my strategic planning, where I won't take a meeting the same week. It has to be scheduled a week in advance. And then I color code my obligations. Mostly it's based on teaching, research, and service. And then I have a separate color for personal tasks. And I always block out my writing times for each day. So that's something big that we're going to touch on today. So if anybody wants to just jump in, we're just going to popcorn around. You don't even need to use hands. Does anybody here already engage in some kind of weekly planning meeting? Or we can use the chat too, I guess. Maybe not. Okay, so that's good. So maybe we're already learning about some things. Yeah, thanks for that. All right, Marygold, will you restart the slides? So weekly planning, when I started doing weekly planning, like I said, it substantially shifted my life. I didn't have those Sunday scaries, as they call them, anymore, where I started to worry about everything that I had going on Sundays. I already started to, or I have started to kind of plan ahead and put things in maybe a week or two in advance. Like I had this, obviously this workshop in my planner for a couple months now. Can you go to the next slide, Marygold? So ultimately, the goal is to implement a daily writing practice. The purpose of a daily writing practice is, a lot of people, myself included, come from that background of wanting to have large blocks of time to work on writing. And we know that with all of our obligations as faculty, staff, and graduate students, that we really don't have those large blocks of time. Sometimes we say we'll push writing or big projects off till the summer, and that doesn't happen, or till winter break. And, those are just really uncertain conditions. So the goal here is really to get into a 30-minute per day writing practice for Monday through Friday. I actually have a 2-hour block, and that's evolved from my 30 minutes. And I know that if I have to cancel my 2-hour block, that at some point throughout the day, I have to hit my 30 minutes. 30 minutes is a lot more easy to manage. 30 minutes, you'd be surprised at how much, if some of you are thinking this is not enough time or a lot of time, you'd be surprised at how much you can accomplish. And I don't mean just in one 30-minute session, but how that builds gradually throughout the week. Excuse me. You learn not to sacrifice your writing time. The irony is that this morning I had to sacrifice my writing time because I had to take my car in for an emergency, whatever. But again, once you get into this, especially if you're blocking out a specific time per day. So for me, it's 9 to 10 every morning, except for Wednesdays right now. And that is my writing time. And I block it out. I don't schedule anything during that time to the best of my ability. The other thing that really helps with this is to join a writing group or to start one yourself. So I mentioned earlier that my NCFDD group from this summer, that we're in a writing group together right now. We meet on Mondays for an hour. One of the, I think, good things that's come out of Zoom is we've created kind of these writing accountability groups. And later on in the presentation, I'll talk more about the differences between different types of writing or support groups. Or start one yourself. And I think Marygold and I can both offer specific tips on how to do this. I mentioned that I had been part of a writing group last fall, and I stayed part of it. It was once I realized how much my writing practices and my research had shifted from doing this daily writing group, then I stopped paying for it. And I started one myself with colleagues in my field at different institutions, and we write and we meet at the same time every day and use the Pomodoro method. And again, we can answer these questions specifically later. You always, or you should, I guess, log your writing time daily. If you register for NCFDD, they have kind of a system already in place that makes logging your time and keeping track of your time really easy. One of the things that I like about the NCFDD system is that you can actually, if you want to be really specific about it, you can log not just your writing time, but you can also log your service and your teaching. And so sometimes when I know, and let's be practical, like sometimes we can't write for 30 minutes a day if it's finals week or midterms week or whatever. And so in lieu of blocking or logging my writing time, I'll log all my teaching time for that day if I'm grading or something like that, just so I know why I didn't write that day. And then especially with this method, you can track your data. So if you're somebody who really likes to look at data and analyze your patterns, your writing patterns, what's working, what's not working, maybe you don't really have a set time, but you can use your data to see what might emerge as a good time to set every day. That's something that you can analyze based on tracking that data. So just by anyone jumping in, I asked kind of a similar question with the weekly planning, but does anybody have a daily writing practice right now? How many of you would like to start a daily writing practice? Or some kind of research practice? The other thing to think about is that writing doesn't always have to be like sit at the keyboard and write, right? I mean, we know this, people tell us this, but when you start the work, that really does emerge. Writing might be, I need to sit down and read this article today, and that's the only time I get to do it is during my writing time. Or I need to go in and ILL a bunch of whatever, reading books, whatever. And so you really start to see how much time you're dedicating to the proverbial pen to paper and how much of it ends up being research time. Can you go to the next slide, Marygold? And some of us admit that we have these fledgling writing practices, daily writing practices. And I think that's good to admit that we're kind of at that point. That's kind of the point that I was at before. And if it would pass by, I wouldn't think anything of it if I missed a day. And now I'm really a little bit more aware of it. So it's not this fragile writing practice like it used to be. I like what Yolanda put in here. I just started the 30-minute challenge from NCFDD. So they do have this 14-day challenge that they periodically offer that's free of charge. And so the link that Yolanda put is in there, and we'll also link to at the end too. So that's great, Yolanda. Congrats on that. Next slide, please.
Just wanted to say really quickly that Advance also can offer support on starting these writing groups. I'm in a writing group right now that is sort of loosely affiliated with Advance. And so far we've done it over Zoom, but they have space there to do it. And then also Advance has been doing like these writing retreats, these weekly writing retreats during spring break and during summer a couple of different times. So there are also opportunities through Advance as well.
Yeah, if you go to the next slide, I'll actually talk a little bit about that. Oh, sorry, it's there. So in terms of thinking about support structures and the different types of ways that you can implement daily writing practices. So there's different options. You can do a write on site where you meet somebody maybe at a coffee shop if you're feeling like you want to be up to it at this point. Advance does offer the write on site, and Julia will have, or Sandy will have to jump in and share, or maybe in the chat and share those days and times, because I know they've shifted. They used to be called the Shut Up and Write. And so if you need that physical, like button chair companionship, that's a great option for that. There's also online writing groups. You can do daily contact and support. Like with my writing group, we'll try to do check-ins at the end. So I'll do a 25-minute Pomodoro timer, 5-minute break, 25-minute timer, 5-minute break, and then check-ins at the end. Right now we're down to an hour. In the summer, over this summer, and then last spring, we did 2-hour blocks, and I found that to be really helpful and effective, and I liked the 2 hours. But now that we're back on campus, 2 hours is just not feasible. So an hour seems to work, and you have that daily contact and support, screen on or off. Accountability groups, so problem solving and support. Marygold talked a little bit about her NCFDD alumni group right now, which I think is more of an accountability group. Marygold, do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, sure. We meet every other week on Friday afternoons for an hour or an hour and a half. And what we follow along with the NCFDD faculty writing their 12-week program. And so we kind of try to do the homework or try to follow along do what they're suggesting. It's usually things like developing your strategic plan, checking in with your strategic plan to see if it's working, etc. So we follow along with this 12-week structure, but then the truth of the matter is that we've kind of gotten to the point where this is where we bring questions or concerns, or I'm really struggling with this kind of resistance. Does anybody have any strategies for me? And in fact, one of the things I'll share later on, the strategic planning, it was something that we worked together in our accountability group to just develop new strategies on that. But what we try to do is we try to celebrate when we do things well, and establish goals and say it out loud and support each other to reach those goals.
Yeah, and Yuting asked a question in the chat, what do you do in the writing groups? So with my writing group, I know there are different types, right? Some people are in writing groups where it's more of like maybe an accountability or reading groups, really, right? Where they're sharing work and then they meet. Marygold and I used to be in a group like this. We called it a writing group, but we would actually just share work. The writing groups that I'm a part of right now are just literally sit there and keep each other company and accountable for showing up to write. It's write in silence. Once I start that timer, everybody knows that you're just kind of working at your own pace. And it sounds maybe a little like babysitting, and maybe that's a little like what we need sometimes, but you really build community around it. And then you can choose whether or not you want to share that work. So like having a mentor, if you have mentors in the field or at UNM already, you can go to them for individual attention and support on writing or writing projects. A writing buddy, it could just be somebody that you check in with through text messaging every day and helping you get started. And then Advance, obviously Advance offers this amazing community support and accountability. So the Advance space is open for writing on Monday and Wednesday from 9:30 to 11:30, and Tuesday and Thursday from 1:30 to 3:30. And I know Sandy usually has snacks, so that helps immensely. All right, Marygold, the next slide is yours, I think.
Yeah, so really what we want to spend the bulk of the time that we have left today is actually doing a little workshop and giving you guys some time to put together a little strategic plan. And so we talked about kind of how the strategic plan fits into other elements like a weekly meeting and a daily writing practice. But the strategic plan just helps you figure out where you're going and tries to give you some mechanisms for being accountable there. And so really there's like 3 things that the NCFDD encourages you to do to create this strategic plan. And they encourage you to do this at the beginning of every semester and then also the summer too. So you always have the strategic plan kind of going. You could have a longer one, a whole year long, but for us, because so much of our work is in this sort of semester chunks, it makes a whole lot of sense to do it in terms of the semester. So there's 3 or 4 real things that are part of the strategic planning process. One is just identifying goals. The second is mapping your steps. So figuring out what projects and tasks you actually have to accomplish to meet your goals. And then, and this is the hardest part for me, and this is, I think, the hardest part for a lot of people, is figuring out how to put those projects or those tasks into your calendar. So you have this then gives you the what, your goals that you're going to accomplish, the how, which is the steps that you have to do to achieve your goal, and the when, which is putting it in your calendar. And then the last thing always is sort of like accountability. So these are the 3 main steps, but if you have an accountability group that you might talk to you about this, or a mentor that you talk through this with, that really helps you kind of keep on track with all of these steps. So what we want to do right now is we want for you guys to think through what are 3 goals, research goals and personal goals that you want to accomplish by the end of the semester. And a lot of us have a whole lot more than 3 for sure, but just to limit us in terms of time, but then also to encourage you to actually only think of relatively few goals, because my problem is every semester is that I have like 12 goals and I just can't keep 12 things 12 balls in the air all the time. So since we just have a few, the 8 weeks or so left, maybe we'll focus just on these 3. So we want to come up with research goals, and we want to come up with personal goals. And the NCFDD really highlights how you don't have to necessarily write teaching goals, although now I actually do this as part of my own practice, but they don't highlight that because a lot of times we already have a strategic plan for our teaching goals. It's called a syllabus. Like actually, we have a ton of accountability with our classes and our students. We have to show up and know what we're talking about. We have to, help them prepare. So our syllabus and our classes, the fact that they meet regularly, already is our strategic plan for teaching. But what often happens is that teaching sometimes takes so much time and we're so accountable with our teaching that we let go of our research goals and our personal goals. They also really highlight personal goals because one of the elements of NCFDD is really to have long-term success. And so finding balance and finding like personal satisfaction with our work is really important because it helps us to avoid burnout and it helps us sort of protect those home and personal goals that we have. Especially for me, I know one of the first things that goes out the window is how many hours I sleep when I get really busy. So trying to keep hold of my personal goals is really important in this process. So we're going to stop talking now for a couple of minutes. I think maybe about 4 or 5 minutes while you write out some goals, at least 3 research goals and at least 3 personal goals that you'd really like to commit to before the end of the semester. So before we do that, just wanted to check, are there any questions about what we want you to do right now, just to write these 3 or so goals down? Any questions? Okay, then just get started. Write them down wherever you need to, a piece of paper, on a Word document, however you want to do it. Just write down 3 goals that are personal goals and 3 goals that are research goals.
We are going to do this with you because part of the program has you assess and recommit halfway through your semester. And so Marygold and I are kind of doing that right now. That's a great question, Anjali. We'll address it in a second because Marygold and I are actually both in collaborative research projects right now.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Okay, that's been about 4 minutes. Are we pretty, is that enough time? Or do we need to wait 30 more seconds as you wrap up your goals? Okay. So hopefully some of you guys have been able to write out some goals, make a little thumbs up or something like that if, or just unmute and say yeah if you were able to. Awesome. Myrriah actually direct messaged me and was like, is 5 minutes too much? But I always find that I actually need all 5 minutes to do it. So we have our research goals, and hopefully you guys also have some personal goals. One of the things that we want to do is to actually revise these goals, because a lot of times when we put down our research goals, they or whatever goals, they just sort of like are this big amorphous goal, and sometimes we don't even really know where to start with it, or we don't know when it's due or what we actually have to do to achieve it. So if we can use this acronym SMART to make our goals SMART, make them more specific, make them measurable, make them attractive, make them realistic, and make them time framed, then it might help us to write goals that are more actionable. So in particular, the measurable, specific, and time framed, this allows us to know really specifically what it is that we want to do, and then we will know when we've achieved it, right? So for instance, the very first time I did this, I was looking back over at my notes. So my very first time ever over the summer, I had my first 2 goals were write my NSF proposal and write a book review that I was working on. Those were literally exactly the words that I wrote in my notebook for my goals. And then I realized that they weren't very specific, measurable, or time framed. And I don't even think that they ever got to be attractive, but they did become realistic because I did finish them. But the way that I sort of revised them was to finish the full draft of my NSF proposal by August 15th so that I can get everything in order to submit by September 3rd. And for my book review, submit book review of A Revolution in Fragments, the specific book I was reviewing, by June 5th. So I'm just gonna take 2 minutes right now for you guys to work on your goals to make them SMART. See if you can revise them to be specific, measurable, attractive, realistic, and time framed.
And Anjali and others who are doing collaborative work right now, you might see if you can already begin to think about ways to fit collaborative projects into your goals to make them SMART. And then we'll give you some pointers after we go through this exercise.
Okay, how are the SMART goals going? Do we need 30 more seconds on the SMART goals? Okay, let's actually just have a little time to talk this through a little bit. First, does anybody can anybody share with us their revised SMART goal? And then there's some great questions, and hopefully we can have like a little bit of a discussion about it. But does anybody have any SMART goals they want to share with us?
I can share mine. I'm Welly Fletcher. I'm an assistant professor of sculpture in the art department. And thanks for having this, by the way. This is already really helpful. So I tried revising my first goal to secure funding for a new piece of equipment, which is specifically a Leo Artec 3D scanner, and get trained on that piece of equipment by the end of December. And then the second goal was to reach out and schedule studio visits with these existing curator contacts regionally, 2 per month in November and December. And then a third goal was applying for 3 related opportunities, which for me are exhibitions, residencies, or conference opportunities each month for the rest of the semester.
Those are awesome. And I especially love like that measurable part of it and time framed part of it, because then you know when if you're hitting your goals or not, you know if you're actually coming through or not. And then it's also really nice that it's really quite specific. I mean, obviously when I say write my NSF proposal, I know exactly what that is, but you know, for you to even just write down, this is the exact specific piece of equipment that I want to secure the funding for. That's awesome. Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing, Willie.
Does anybody else want to share? Maybe we can address some of the questions in the chat.
Yeah, I think that was a really great one. So, so making the goals attractive, and we can open this up to sort of brainstorming together, but to make the goals attractive, Myrriah suggested rewards, which I had never thought of before. I think that's awesome. But for me, you know, it's important things that I need to do. So it's attractive because it will, you know, be good rewards for me, like, you know, funding for my projects, etc. Any other ideas for making them attractive?
It could be a CV line, you know, think about how you might incorporate it into your CV. You know, Marygold used a great example with the NSF grant. A lot of people apply for NSF grants. If they don't get them, it's still a CV line. You've completed a ton of work, and it's a grant applied for, right? Another way to, I think, make a goal attractive is to see if you can bring people into the project. So if you're working on an individual project, one way to motivate yourself, and this is kind of reversing your question, I guess, from earlier, Anjali, is to see if you can invite somebody to take part in the project. And I know some of us have, you know, different thoughts on collaborative work, but that's another way to hold yourself both accountable and to make it attractive, is that you're not working basically in solitude on a project.
And one other thing is, if you really can't make a goal attractive, then maybe it doesn't need to be a goal. Like if you're not at some point like choosing the things that are most exciting to you or most rewarding to you, then you might actually just sort of rethink that goal, or maybe to go in a different direction with that project, or do something a little bit different, because also we don't want to get burnout on doing things that we don't like. So part of the NCFDD, they're always really encouraging us is to figure out what the things that we're most passionate about, what is attractive for us, and then try to build kind of our projects around what is attractive already to us. So if you're having a hard time making it attractive, then maybe we rethink if you even need to do that to begin with. Go ahead, Myrriah.
Jessica asked another great question that will open up to the floor. How do you write specific goals when you don't know what you need to do yet? Does anybody have any feedback for Jessica? I think that this is a really great question because often we embark on projects. They're just ideas and we don't know what we're going to do yet. And it's really difficult to make like a timeline of sorts for that. So, your goal, you might have to readjust your goal so that the goal is come up with a proposal, come up with a specific plan, create a SMART goal for X project by the end of the semester. Marygold, any ideas on that?
Yeah, actually, why don't I just go on a little bit, because I think that this is really a great question. I'm just going to keep going with the share this. Because so the second thing that the NCFDD really wants you to do is to figure out what are the steps in your goal. And so you might not have all of the steps in your goal itself, but in this strategic planning process, figuring out kind of the big projects that you need to do and then the small tasks that you need to do to achieve those goals. And so, and sometimes it's like a chicken and the egg. Like, how do you make your goal specific and time framed and measurable when you don't know what you're going to do? But exactly like Myrriah said, you can kind of keep revising it as you figure out what it is. So the second step, which I would like us to do now, is to list out what are the projects and the tasks that you need to do to achieve your SMART goal that you've already set for yourself. And by projects, what we really mean are sort of like a big set of activities or tasks that you need to do. And tasks are the specific things that you will actually be doing. So you know your goal, but how are you going to achieve it? What do you need to do? In some ways, it's like a reverse engineering to break it into these smaller tasks.
So to kind of think about Wally's example, which is to secure funding for a piece of equipment and learn how to use the piece of equipment, those are two projects, right, within that SMART goal. Secure funding and then learn how to use the equipment, and then the tasks, each of those projects has specific tasks that go along with it. So you're essentially scaffolding it.
Yeah, because in that same project of securing funding and then learning how to use it, in the securing funding, you have to put down a task is figure out what opportunities are out there. Reach out to your contacts in different ways. So you have to you can break it into these even smaller tasks, and part of your project can be figure out how to do this. So I'm going to be quiet for maybe we'll do about 2 minutes as you guys come up with projects and tasks for at least 1 or 2 of your SMART goals. Okay, maybe we'll take about 30 more seconds to wrap up sort of the projects and the tasks. Okay, cool. So let's keep moving. I realize we just have 10 minutes left and we want to get through it just a little bit more. So now we know the what, that's the goals that we have, and they're smart and they're measurable, and we can keep revising them to make them even smarter. And then we know the how, these are the projects and the tasks that we need to accomplish. And the hardest part for me always is to make sure that these things get done. I am super good up to this point. I can do this all day long, but figuring out how to get these projects and tasks onto my calendar is pure pain and misery for me. So one of the things that there's all sorts of ways that you can do this, but this last task is in many ways the very most important. And so one of the things that they have you do, it's a 12-week program for the NCFDD. So they have you map out 12 weeks and then you just sort of map your projects or your tasks onto that. So for us, we're talking about we have really about 8 more weeks in the semester. And so what I want to do right now is to take those projects that you've already identified or even specific tasks. For me, it's easier to have projects to map onto my weeks, because then in my weekly planning meetings, I will then put the specific tasks into my calendar. But however you want to do it, to map what you're going to do, the how of it, onto the when of it. So now we'll just take 2 more minutes, and let you see if you can put some of those projects into weeks, because you can't do it all at the same time, and you have to figure it out. One of the first things that we like to do a lot of times is once we have our weeks sort of figured out, then we go through and we block off weeks where we might have things going on. Like if you're going to a conference, if your in-laws are coming in from out of town, if your child has, some big activity that they have to do, etc. It might be kind of nice to block off that time. So you're not even setting yourself up for disaster on those weeks. So the first thing I want you to do is just to block off if there's any weeks that you just aren't going to be able to make a whole ton of progress. And then the second thing I want you to do is to see if you can put those projects and tasks onto weeks. And so I'll be quiet for another 2 minutes. So we'll just take another 30 seconds on this task. Great. How did that go for everybody? Did you guys get some things on your strategic plan? Excellent. So I want to just show you really quickly, Myrriah and I have examples from our own strategic plans that we've been working on and working with. And so I'll show you how I've started doing it lately. And this actually comes from one of the people in my accountability group. So first thing I do is I try to put all of my writing and research. I'm increasingly doing teaching, service, and personal goals up here. Then I point out the action steps and the due dates for each of these. And I try to kind of, this is a working document for me. So I cross off things. Sometimes I just totally blow through my deadlines, and that's fine too. So I have my goal, I have my how I'm going to do it, and I even have some due dates there. And then what I do actually is I take those primary tasks that I have, and then I put them on the weeks of the semester. So I know more or less each week what projects that I should be working on. And then as I go through the semester, I actually make purple the things that I actually accomplished. So hopefully it's going to look all purple by the end, even though it starts off color coded. Myrriah, do you want to share yours? Or yeah, you want to share yours and then we'll open up for questions?
Yeah, I'm trying to share, but apparently I don't have Zoom set up for sharing yet. It's not coming up because this is a new computer.
Well, I think I have yours.
The JPEGs should be on the slides. Can you just pop those up? It's not going to be super big, but at least I can talk about it.
Yeah.
So sorry this isn't larger, but mine is more of a big picture, I guess, than Marygold's. I may actually switch to the way Marygold's doing it for strategic planning for next semester, because I like those details. The types of details that Marygold has in her strategic plan are the details that I do in my weekly planning. So I think having them in two places would be really useful for me. But I just have my personal goals, professional goals, and accountability outlined at the top. My projects, I have them organized by, again, by my writing, my teaching, my research, my service, and personal goals or family goals. And then this is like, I don't even know if I finished my strategic plan at the beginning of the fall, to be perfectly honest. I feel like it was out of the frying pan into the fire. My strategic plan for the summer was definitely more detailed, but for the most part, I'm still on track on some of this stuff. I haven't crossed anything off on this particular version, but I have all the big projects in there, and I have a separate sheet that lists what those professional and personal goals are kind of spelled out that I didn't want to share on the public version. So again, it makes sense to me. You can also see that I have some deadlines in there as well. So again, hard deadlines for different projects. And again, there's like no really right way or wrong way to create your strategic plan. Really, it's what works for you and what makes sense, but it has all those main things that we've touched on. So your SMART goals, having your projects, having your tasks, doing your weekly planning, and implementing the daily writing. Because if you're not doing the daily writing, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get your goals accomplished.
Yeah, and then just think about accountability and building an accountability where you can share your strategic plan with mentors or colleagues or your writing group or your accountability group, etc. Yeah, and let's see, do we have any? Oh, I don't know what's happening to my computer, but we'll just stop share.
We have a few more minutes for questions if anybody has questions or comments.
Yeah, was there any other questions? And I wanted to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and not to undermine the message, but we will send out to everyone the link to a workshop we had recently on developing reality-based and sustainable writing practices, which gives you some alternatives for making writing progress each week. Daily is great, but sometimes you can't do that. So it offers a couple of different models and ways to motivate yourself to write and to think about your schedule, which is going to be a great complement to this workshop, which has offered a lot of useful tools. So we will send that out So you can watch that if you didn't get to see it, and that'll give you some things.
Myrriah's family is behind her. I would like to strongly encourage you to go to that developing reality-based writing habits. A lot of the same, you can tell the ways that a lot of the same information is shared in NCFDD as was at this workshop. And I agree with Yolanda that it does have a lot of significant costs. So trying to write those costs into grants. And I still was able to talk to my department and my college to help support, to defray the other costs as well. So talk to, you know, your department, your college, et cetera, to get some of those paid for.
And to answer or to address Jessica's question, part of the program, the 12-week bootcamp program, actually has a week where we go through and do a midterm kind of assessment. It's a different tool, and we can send out those questions as well. I found them to be really helpful when I did them over the summer. I haven't yet done them for this semester. But, you know, we do, like Julia said, like we do fall off track. Developing a sustainable writing practice, if you don't already have one, is something really difficult to do. It probably took me about 4 months to get mine kind of solidified. And it slipped this semester, but you know, what works for one person doesn't always work for another person. So I think that's important to always keep in mind. It would be really difficult for me hearing colleagues talk about how they were writing every day. And I was thinking, like, how are they writing every day? I don't have time to write every day. Once I was able to implement that, I used the advanced workshop this summer. I used some other, you know, writing groups and writing the methods that we've talked about today. And I was able to accomplish some really, really huge projects in the last, I'd say 12 months, even despite COVID, even despite having a baby during COVID, like all of these crazy things. And I got major projects done. So I think, you know, the small steps are really important. 30 minutes a day doesn't seem like a lot, but it really adds up.
The other workshop that Julia is referring to talked about keeping a log or a writing journal just to keep track. That's been really useful for me. And it also allows me to be really curious about what works and what doesn't work. I find that if I don't have snacks, then I will obsess about snacks and will like walk across campus before I'll start writing. So now I know I have to have snacks. I use the Pomodoro method. Also, I use some, like having some noise is really good. And it's just been that writing down what works and keeping track in my log and in my journal so that I can get back on track there as well.
Other questions?
Yeah, so it's 5 o'clock and we'll hang here for a little while longer if you guys have questions for us, but thanks so much for hanging out with us. And you can email us. Both Myrriah and I have very unique names, and so you can find our emails super easily.
And thanks to Julia in advance for hosting us. When we talked about wanting to do this summer, Julia was kind enough to let us explore this workshop. So thank you.
Well, and I very much thank the two of you for doing it. I'm not sure you expected quite such an enthusiastic response from me when you said, yeah, we could do this. I said, okay, when?
And we didn't realize how busy we were going to be. We were like, how can we give a workshop on staying on track when we're like falling off the rails? But, you know, we have a little bit of information from the NCFDD to share. So thank you so much, Julia.
And take part in the free stuff that NCFDD offers. A lot of the webinars are like that they include in the 12-week bootcamp are actually free just on the platform. So even if you can't get into, like I talked about earlier, it took me over a year to actually get the bootcamp paid for and get into it, but I was already accessing some of the tools through the free webinars and stuff. So if you don't already have your membership activated, I encourage you to go do that like today.
Is there a UNM specific link for that, or do we just go to the website and sign up?
You go to the website and it will ask you if you have an, I think it's like if it asks if you have an institution, if you're part of an institution, something like that. It's pretty self-explanatory once you start the process.
But make sure you do, I mean, you get more stuff because you are part of an institution that is a member. You can sign up without being part of an institution and you get some free stuff, but there's more stuff that's available.
Awesome. Thank you.